Cinco de Mayo, and welcome to our offices here. My name is Jerry Church. I work here at ACOG, and we've never had a public meeting here before, so this was new territory for us, and we're very happy that you could show on a beautiful day. We were actually worried about the potential of the thunder playing tonight. And so we don't have that problem. So we have you here, and we thank you for this. So I'm going to introduce our consulting team here in just a moment. Just some house rules. Feel free to take advantage of the chips and salsa. We have some water in the back. If you need to use the facilities, go through this back room here and then turn left. And I think our intention is to hopefully be done by 6 o'clock. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, based on the context of our consultant's presentation style, you could probably go ahead and ask during the presentation. If you have formal comments that you want to make, we have some written forms in the back, and also we have an online presence. If there's anything that you miss from the previous meeting, everything is online. So I will say this is the second of 3 planned meetings. It looks like our final meeting is set for sometime either June 15th or 16th, and we'll have details on that forthcoming. So, having said that, I see some very important people. Holly?
Would you remind everybody if they haven't signed in?
Very good, yes. We do have, this is a public meeting, and we have a sign-in sheet. I encourage each of you to sign in because it really helps us acknowledge your presence. So, having said that, I'd like to introduce Doug Tennant with Jacobs, and he'll introduce his team, and we'll get into this presentation. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jerry. As Jerry said, I think what we've tried all through this planning process is to make this a dialogue instead of a presentation. We're not up here preaching to you. We want to have a dialogue with you. And I think most of our meetings have been that way. Before I turn out the lights, Alan Dreet is our project director and really the brains behind our team. And Alan's done a lot of intermodal hub facilities and transit facilities across the country, and is actually a resource for FTA in a kind of a quality control, kind of wise, gray-haired old man kind of way for FTA. I don't say that very often because Alan kicks pretty hard, but he does this not only for clients like you all, but he actually reviews other people's work, and FTA trusts him that much. So I'm pleased to be working with him. Jerry Perry is a compadre of Alan's, and he's with here tonight. And Lee Nichols is with our firm also. Lee's a new planner in our office here, a transit planner. So we've got a team here. What I point out just real quickly, we have a lot of technical information, and some of you all have seen it, and I hope that you'll bear with us as we plow through it. We'll stop at some key points to say, hey, are we all together? Are we all tracking on the same rail line? And then move on from there. I would point out that this says Advisory Committee Meeting Number 3. You're going to see what that Advisory Committee has seen. I mean, we're all about transparency. The public ought to see what the key decision makers are seeing. So we're going to show you what we showed them, and hopefully you'll come to the same conclusions that I think they came to, which was I think they were excited about and pretty unanimous in their ideas about it. So if you can grab the lights, and Alan, real quickly, team introductions, I've done that. We're going to recap Tier 1 and then plow through all that technical data. As Jerry said, we probably have about 35 minutes worth of talking, but we'll give you some ability to ask questions. Go ahead, Alan. Real quickly, the vision for this project is about an intermodal transportation hub. But in our opinion, that facility can be much more than just serving a transportation purpose. That facility can become a gateway to Oklahoma City and the region. It can serve as as a symbol for that regional transportation system and enhance the image of public transportation as a whole. And finally, as importantly, is it can be a catalyst, a continuing catalyst for downtown economic development. Go ahead. What the slide down in the lower right, you see downtown, Bricktown, core to shore. Again, the vision is all about providing those regional connections, regional commuter rail, and how do we bring people who are in cars now and give them another option to get downtown to jobs or to entertainment, but also link that transit to the community and enhance economic development. What Alan's going to do now is kind of start walking you through those technical things. But the bottom line at the core, this hub is more than just a transportation project. It's about economic development, it's about community image, but it's also about serving as a centerpiece of that future regional system. Go ahead, Alan.
We started out talking last time we were here about opportunities and constraints before we really got into design. And this is just listing some of the key elements that we were looking at. As Doug mentioned, connectivity, of trying to tie all the elements in and around the downtown area together through this facility by providing access to those, making sure that we're introducing and understanding the impact on potential joint development so this becomes an economic development driver as well. And then we also have to understand the existing freight movements and how passengers are going to interface with that freight system. So those are the things that we've been trying to put together in terms of understanding the constraints, but also looking at those in terms of how we can solve those problems to create opportunities. We also talked a little before about why do an intermodal center, and I'm not going to go through these in detail. Doug kind of covered some of these, but it's about interconnectivity of bringing as many modes together as possible, so it's easy to transfer from one mode to the other, which is going to increase the ridership essentially for whatever transportation modes that you're using. It's also about providing that last mile distribution system. If somebody's coming in by commuter rail, how do they get to their final destination? It may be a mile away or 2 miles away or to another district. And so we're looking at how we interface those together and making it easier for the passenger to get off the train and not have to rent a car and still get to their destination. And then also integrate transit-related retail and mixed-use development in and around the area, taking advantage of and leveraging those passengers that are going to be using this facility. Kind of taking a retailer's perspective from it as well. So last time we started out on looking at what we call the Tier 1 site analysis, where we had 10 different sites that had been identified in our first meeting that were basically put on the table for evaluation. We went through an evaluation process. And as you recall at the last meeting, we wound up with taking those 10 sites down to 3. And we did that by combining a few of these. Number 1 and 2, which were our northern sites, were combined because they were contiguous to each other. Sites 3, 5, and 6, which is the Santa Fe Terminal parking lot north of Reno and parking lot south of Reno, as one site. And then site 8, which was the lumberyard site down here, as a third site. So we carried those, what we've been doing since the last meeting is carrying these further, developing additional evaluation criteria, testing those against the criteria as well as the facility needs in the program that have also developed along the way. So what we'll be talking about now, from now on, are these 3 sites.
I think so those 3 sites made the short list. Now we're going to try to figure out what are those key transit capacity and operational issues that impact how those sites either work or don't work from a hub standpoint. That's about ridership, how many commuter rail or how many regional commuter people are riding on the system, and then how that ridership translates into people using the hub. So Alan, why don't you take us through those operational and capacity issues?
Which were the 3 again? Narrow it down.
Go back one, the North Bricktown parking lot, which is the parking lot north right here. Then a combination of Santa Fe, the parking lot in Bricktown, and the parking lot in Bricktown on either side of Reno. And then number 8 was the lumberyard site. And that site was primarily kept in place because of the potential of high-speed rail maybe having a southern route to Tulsa.
And I probably should back up a little bit and talk about that. The purple line here is indicating potential high-speed rail routes, of which at the time there were 2 potential corridors. One was to come on through downtown, make a right turn here and get onto the UP rail corridor that's currently leased, or to make the transition here at at the main UP line, both that head from commuter rail standpoint as well as a high-speed rail standpoint, both head to the west. And what we found out during the process in terms of talking to ODOT is they preferred to come through downtown to make this curve here, which had a great deal of impact on the preferred site, as you'll see in a few minutes.
So how do we take the 10 pounds that need to go into the rail facility, the hub, and how does it fit on each one of those 3 sites? So Alan, why don't you lead us through that? What's in that 10 pounds?
Yeah. Well, first we started looking at the transit system plan, and you've been carrying this forward for several years now. But the blue line is showing the primary commuter rail corridor, which was initially identified in 2006 as part of the fixed guideway study that goes from Edmond in the north through downtown to Norman in the south, and then another line that split off somewhere in the downtown area that would go over to serve Midwest City. Now, in addition to that, there were 2 primary BRT routes that were identified. We had the Reno route, Reno to downtown, located here. We had a northwest to downtown line, indicated by the green line here. And then there was a couple sublines off of that. There was the Will Rogers Airport line that came off the Reno line, and there was a 54th Street line that went out towards the airport as well. So in beginning to work with the ridership model, which essentially informs us based on demographics and planned growth, city planning principles and so forth in terms of understanding how the city is going to grow, where people are going to be, where the destinations are. We use these to model those to tell us essentially how many people will be using not only the corridor, but how many people will be in and using that facility, which helps us determine not only the best location for the facility, but also where the facility should be located. So this shows that we have essentially 3 commuter rail lines. One that is Edmond to Norman that starts here and goes all the way through, connects to Norman. An Edmond to Midwest City, which would be a second line on the same route that comes through the downtown area and then heads east to Midwest City. Another corridor from Norman to Midwest City that would start at Norman, obviously go through downtown and head to Midwest City. There is also potential for a future Edmond to Yukon line, which would follow the same route and then maybe replace the BRT corridor going out to Reno and then to Yukon. Right now, the ridership numbers didn't really justify putting this expense for commuter rail for that, so it's been planned currently as bus rapid transit, which is a fast-moving bus that has enhancements to move it quicker than the traffic. But all of those essentially converge at the hub, wherever that hub may wind up being. So this is essentially what informed our program, in addition to high-speed rail and Amtrak and anything else, any other modes that may serve the facility as well. One other thing I might mention is that those 10 sites that we previously showed here, we did a ridership analysis on each of those sites to see which of the sites generated the most ridership. And I'm going to take a minute to back up here, I apologize. But what the ridership model told us is that most of the ridership was being generated by the core of downtown. Downtown and Bricktown work was a destination. For instance, the ridership on site 10 and 8 was extremely low, but the ridership, anything that was in the core area, was very high, just in general. So you'll see how that starts to inform the program here in a few minutes. But it also helped us refine those sites in terms of which ones performed the best. So if we think about those lines and kind of diagram it out, this is looking at the commuter rail operations plan. The blue line is the Edmond to Norman line, which goes through the hub, which is the black dot here. We also have and that will be operating at what we call 60-minute headways, 1 train per hour during the peak, 1 train every 2 hours off peak. And we have another train that would go from Edmond to Midwest City and basically make the turn at the hub, also operating at a 1-hour headway during peak and 2-hour headway off peak. But what that means is if you're in Edmond heading to Oklahoma City, you've got 1 train every half hour, which is fairly characteristic of a well-operated commuter rail system. You only have to wait 1/2 hour for a train. Yes, sir.
Have you told us or shown us yet what you all are proposing that will be at this hub? I'm still not clear in my mind. You keep talking about rail, high-speed rail and commuter rail, but what exactly are you all saying? Because I've asked the question before and don't seem to get an answer about, is it going to be a complete transportation hub like they have in Fort Worth? Okay, you shake your head yes.
Let me answer we'll get to that in a minute, but let me go ahead and stop and answer we'll get to the full program in a minute, but let me stop and answer your question. The modes that we are planning on serving here are the 3 to 4 commuter rail lines, the 3 bus rapid transit lines. The local bus will stop here. Again, the bus rapid transit will stop here. We will have potential private shuttles and taxis to local hotels. And then we'll also have the proposed streetcar line, which will come through the hub.
How about intercity buses? You're not-
Intercity bus is something that is on the table as a possibility. We've recently learned that Greyhound has decided to relocate to the east on Reno, but we've made provisions to have intercity bus here. Could be that other intercity bus operators want to be here.
Has anybody in authority with some authority here in Oklahoma City talked to both Jefferson and the Greyhound Corporation about locating here?
We're in the process of talking to them. I don't, as far as authority in the city, I think the city's looking to this consultant team to design a hub or to plan a hub that can accommodate all of those modes. And those modes again are commuter rail, local bus, streetcar, bikes, pedestrians, high-speed rail, Amtrak, intercity bus, all of those we're trying to accommodate. Now, you know, again, the community has control over some of those. They don't have control over a private bus operator. All we can do is extend the hand. They got to extend the hand to shake that hand. So at this point, we're making room for them, but we don't know right now whether they want to be here or not. So that's where we would be on that. Let's plow through. If you all will, let me suggest something, because we'll never make it through this. Again, I want your questions. If you'll let Alan go through about 10 more slides, 10 more minutes, we'll have a stopping point and we'll ask questions then, okay?
Yeah, and I think you'll see that we address all those modes a little later in the
I want
presentation.
to bring up one thing. We have a plan called Rail 90, and it's called MetNet, and it's a mesh. It goes all over the city, and it'd be $5 billion, and I think we'll get the money from the National Monetary Fund if we stand united. But, Alan, those headway times are bad. And furthermore, how are you helping the whole city? We need a rail line on both sides of the city that will go up by the Softball Hall of Fame and then one up Lake Etna Parkway. We need a mesh. This isn't going to help anybody but those people along the lines. We're in a position, Dave Herbertson has been working that line in Midwest City for ages. We're in a situation where we can't profiteer off of this anymore. We need to bring the whole city up. And I very much object to the whole process. I have been told that it's this far along. And I will see people in federal court because this entire process is misuse federal funds and deceptive. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks. I think some of those questions, again, may be answered as we move ahead. Going back to the corridors, the yellow line is representing the Norman to Midwest City line. So again, in Norman, you've got 2 trains per hour. One that continues through to Edmond, one that goes to Midwest City, and then this is showing the 2 BRT routes that connect at the hub, one that heads out Reno, one that heads up to the northwest. And then in the future, we're anticipating that there will be another line that would replace that Reno BRT line and have a commuter rail line that would go from Edmond through the hub over to Yukon. Then we're also looking at overlaying the downtown circulator, which is your downtown distribution system in addition to the bus system that would provide that last mile connectivity to the destinations downtown as well. So this is just kind of diagramming the system, looking at the commuter rail part of it. Commuter rail is really what's driving this project from a ridership standpoint. And you'll see how that overlays with Amtrak and high-speed rail here in a minute. Still talking about commuter rail, based on that ridership model, and that is based on the understanding of where people want to go and where people live and how they access the system. We're looking at, for 2035, what their model is telling us is that there's about 6,400 passengers per day on these 3 lines, using the system itself on a daily basis. And to put that in perspective, this is just showing essentially all the commuter rail systems in the United States and their overall ridership numbers. And you can see they range everywhere, I don't know if you can read this, but from 800 a day to 330,000 a day. But when you start to get above this line, we're talking about very high density corridors in the Northeast. And the ones that we felt like were a little more comparable to this system are 13, 14, and 15 here. The Sounder Commuter Rail in Seattle, which runs about 8,700 passengers a day. It's been operating since 2000. TRE, which you're probably familiar with in Fort Worth, that goes through the Fort Worth Intermodal Center, is running about 8,100 a day now, having been operating for about 12, 13 years. And then Utah Transit Authority in Salt Lake City is running about the same number, 6,400 passengers per day. So you can see that you're kind of falling in the middle of the pack here, which for a new system is very good. You may think 6,400 riders is not a lot, but in terms of a commuter rail system, it's telling us it could be a fairly effective system, as well as being very cost effective. So that just kind of puts it in perspective in terms of what they're projecting at this point. Now we could say that we don't believe those numbers and it's going to be higher, and we'll address that in a minute. But typically when you run a ridership model, usually when they've gone back and tested the ridership model against actual ridership, the actual ridership is usually a little bit lower than the model, at least for the first 10 years or so. So what does that mean in terms of our commuter rail operation and how many people are going to use the hub? Again, we're talking about one train every hour, 8 feet, on each line, which means you got one train coming through the hub every 20 minutes. The people that the model is also telling us out of those 6,400 people, about 2,000 of them, a little over a third, are getting on and off the facility at this hub, and that's going to inform us in terms of how much space we need for the hub itself. Where those are coming from, we've got 300 people that are transferring for the bus or the streetcar. We've got 1,550 that are walk-up, so they're basically arriving here for a destination. They're either coming here for entertainment or to work downtown. And we have about 60 that desire to be here, to catch the train here, but they live far enough away where they're going to drive their car. So that's the buildup of that 1,910, or about 2,000 passengers. And going back to that ridership model that we tested against all the sites, one reason this site is ranking high on the ridership number is that most of the patrons are walk-up. So we've got to be within general proximity, within a couple block walk of downtown for this facility to really be effective. So that's a key element as we move ahead and talk about how these sites rank as we go back to that criteria. Doug?
So 6,400 people using a regional commuter rail system coming to a hub. That translates into 2,000 people going through that hub on a daily basis. Again, I think what we were trying to do within our team is use established information, established studies that have been either adopted by local communities or by the state, and use real numbers about how to figure out how many people would be using this hub facility. So now that we've kind of figured out how many people will be coming to it, now how does that translate into a program? How big are the platforms? How big is the building itself, the hub building itself? So Alan will walk us through that.
First things we looked at are the type of commuter rail vehicles, and there's numerous different technologies that are used out there, but the ones that are kind of coming to the top of the chart in terms of what have been used most for the newest systems are two types. One is called a push-pull operation, and both of these use what are called bi-level cars, which are very effective because you've actually got two levels to the vehicle. You've got two stories, if you will. One at the boarding level, and then there'll be a set of stairs inside to go to an upper level. For a commuter rail operation that's going over 40 miles or so, it's very effective. It doesn't require as much train length. The push-pull operation means that it's pulled by a locomotive. So you normally use a system where you have a long number of cars that need to be pulled by the locomotive. Characteristics of the vehicles themselves are all fairly similar, though. This one is the coach length is 85 feet, seats about 150 people, so we start looking at that in terms of how many vehicles do we need to carry those 6,400 people per day. And you can see at the bottom here where this type of technology is being used around the country. It is being used in Fort Worth on the Trinity Railway Express, most recently probably on the New Mexico Rail Runner. Another one that's very similar is also a bi-level coach, but this one is called a diesel multiple unit, meaning that each car has a built-in diesel unit in it. So it doesn't need the locomotive. You can run one car, two cars, three cars, and they're a little more cost-effective, especially if you're running a smaller number of vehicles. But again, it seats about the same number of people. This one's a little bit, seats a few more, about the same length. So in terms of informing us how many vehicles we need and so forth, it's very similar. So these were just two examples. There's probably 5 or 6 others out there that are commonly being used that we could look to as well. And that'll be part of a future study when commuter rail starts to advance as far as that study. We also looked at that from a capacity standpoint. And based on that 150 passenger car, we can essentially handle 6,480 passengers per day with one car. So this is showing the platform, the passenger car and engine, and about that length. So that's about the number of people that are going to be carried today. This is telling us that one car might work, but it's borderline, so you're probably going to want to have two, and obviously you can buy another couple in case one's out of service or something. But initially, you can handle essentially your capacity needs with one car. And let's say we don't believe that, and we need further future expansion. So the beauty about transit is, in order to handle more capacity, you don't need more lane width like a highway. You just start adding more cars. So we can go from 6,400 to over 10,000 people a day with 2 cars, 16,000 with 3 cars, and about 20,000 people a day with 4 cars. And that's based on that 60-minute, 120-minute headway. We want to go a little further, we double the headways. And we go to a 30-minute peak, 60-minute off-peak, and you can see that we can get up to about 40,000 passengers a day, which is carrying a lot of passengers. I mean, this is very similar to what's being carried on some of the corridors in the Northeast in a very mature system. So what that's telling us is, with about a 425-foot platform, we can handle the capacity up to about 600% over what is currently projected. And you'll see in a minute, again, how that trickles down into the overall facility plan for this. We want to make sure that we can accommodate whatever the needs are, even the ridership numbers are off by a factor of 600. We're still okay with that platform. The other thing we looked at, and we'll go into detail on this, but we started to look at some train schedules and just looked at over that ridership period of the peak period, the off-peak period, how we schedule these trains. And we took the Edmond-Norman line and scheduled those out, the Norman-Midwest City, interspersed those, the Edmond to Midwest City, and then we went ahead and added that Edmond-Yukon line. So instead of one train every 20 minutes normally, we would now have one train every 15 minutes. We've got 4 lines that are going through this facility. We want to make sure we can handle that capacity. This proved to us that we can do that. The other elements that we have to overlay is what happens with high-speed rail. Do they need their own platform? Is it a separate facility, or can it combine with the commuter rail system, or can it combine with Amtrak as it does in many of the corridors, even the Northeast corridor in the United States, which is the only corridor that's currently running high-speed rail. High-speed rail and commuter rail share the same platform. Sometimes Amtrak share the same platform for commuter rail. So what we did is we took the schedules that came out of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation high-speed rail report that was done in 2009 and started to overlay those with the commuter rail schedules. And what we found out is that it works. And we wind up with trains about every 10 to 15 minutes. That's easily operable with an operations plan. And this might change 10 times before we get to where we're going with this project, but it just informs us that it looks like we can interline these technologies together and have them all work on one platform. The other thing this is telling us, if we start to look at that peak hour ridership number, is that for commuter rail, we've got about 56 passengers boarding at one time, based on that 2,000 passengers per day. You got 3 lines coming through here every hour. Each train boards about 56 people here. Amtrak will be boarding about 170 people here twice a day. High-speed rail will be boarding about 480 people here 6 times a day. So that totals to 706 passengers that could be in this facility at any one time, which also informs us about how much facility space do we need. That gets down to how much waiting space, how many ticket counters, how many restrooms, and everything else. So keep that number in mind as we move ahead. Then this is just a summary of the platform capacity. For commuter rail, we assumed that initially we needed about 350 feet, which would accommodate an engine and up to 3 cars. And that could be expanded further in the future. Amtrak currently has about a 1,200-foot platform. That's pretty much their standard, so we're maintaining that. High-speed rail, based on the need for I believe 6 cars, needs a 900-foot platform because their cars are a little longer. They're a little more luxurious. They have double seats as opposed to triple seats. It's a little more of a luxury type liner, so you only have about 50 passengers per vehicle on high-speed rail, so they need a longer train to accommodate their number of passengers. And then the facility itself, based on the operational needs of Amtrak, of commuter rail, and all the other facilities that will be in here, as well as the amount of waiting space we need and passenger service space we need for that 706 people, comes out to about 34,000 square feet per passenger. 34,000 square feet for the total facility. And you mentioned Fort Worth a while ago. The Fort Worth Intermodal Center is about 29,000 square feet. So we're talking about something that's a little bigger than that if you're just talking about the facility, the enclosed space itself. And that includes some space for growth over time as well. Real quick on parking, this is just a total of the amount of parking that we see we need over the long term need of the facility. Earlier, we saw the ridership numbers told us 60 spaces for commuter rail. Amtrak, assuming that about half the people that are using this facility every day need parking, it's 170. High-speed rail. High-speed rail is trying to push their parking facilities further out. They've got 2 designated stations one outside of Oklahoma City, one outside of Tulsa, where they're going to try to draw the majority of their passengers that are arriving by car into large park and ride lots. So they need a smaller number in an intercity station, which is about 500 spaces. And we may not need that 500 spaces, or we won't need it until high-speed rail is in operation. So that might be a future addition. And then we just need a few spaces for people that are maintaining heavy security in the facility. So we're looking for a need of about a little under 900 parking spaces for the facility. Other modes, as you mentioned earlier. We will have the bus rapid transit and the local bus routes coming through here. Based on the number of routes that are coming through here, we need about 6 bays. We've listed intercity and private bus, which would be Greyhound and others. Right now, we don't have that input, and typically that input changes over time. A lot of times you'll have, once this facility planning gets further along, you'll have operators coming to you saying, I want to be in your facility. But we have accommodated that, and we're kind of looking at what is the maximum number of bays or buses that we can accommodate here at some point in the future if it should come in. We have the streetcar stop. There'll be 6 streetcar, the line will have 6 cars coming by per hour, so we need 1 bay for streetcar, and then we were looking at the need for 2 bays for taxis or shuttles, private shuttles standing by. So that's kind of giving us the program that we're using to move forward into the facility itself.
Let's stop there. So what we have are 6,400 commuters coming in on a regional rail line. That translates into parking spaces for some of those folks. We've got high-speed rail in the future. All of this is related to 2035. We're projecting out essentially 25 years into the future, trying to figure out how big this facility needs to be to accommodate a passenger rail system. Okay?
6,400 is nothing these days.
Well,
and by 2035, it's really going to be nothing.
Well, understood, and I appreciate your opinion of that.
This is the reason that rail is subsidized, is your models. Now, we have a proposal to move 5 semis at a time and generate a lot more traffic than you ever thought about.
Okay, Phil, let me ask you this. Tell them your website so they can go see your proposal.
Well,
And then
send me email at rail90@aol.com.
Okay, did everybody hear that? Rail90 at